Hi, everybody. How are you doing today? Hope you're all doing well. We are back for our final episode of the season, and we have the one and only, needs no introduction, Caroline from Offthegridneedlearts. How are you doing, Caroline?
Hi, good, Gerald. Thanks. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing well, thank you. So let's go over all the details. Caroline can be found on her YouTube channel, Offthegridneedlearts, Offthegridneedlearts. I'm so used to just finding it. I don't even then I always just like Off the Grid Studios, Offthegridneedlearts. I always get it wrong anyway. So Offthegridneedlearts. Because then there's also Friday Off the Grid on YouTube if you're interested in following our group on
Facebook, not YouTube. Friday Off the Grid.
See, I'm messing it all up already. Caroline is on YouTube at Offthegridneedlearts.
Correct.
The Facebook group that we use for our Friday night stitch-ins and throughout the week for any kind of positive, friendly posts about cross-stitching and the needle arts is Friday Off the Grid.
There you go.
And she can be found on Instagram as Offthegridneedlearts.
Yeah, very good.
And her business is Ever Totes with an S.
That's right. At Ever Totes with an S.
Everything will be linked below, and I'm sure it popped up on the screen.
I know. You know, I used to have another name. I used to be, my Instagram name and my Ravelry name used to be Carrie Fluter. So at one time I had, 4 different names that I was trying to keep track of. So I changed all of that just to Offthegridneedlearts. So it's a little easier to keep a handle on now.
A little.
Just a little. It's still a lot. Oh, I have a blog too, but it's kind of defunct. I haven't really posted anything on there, but that's also offthegridneedlearts.com. And that's what I started with, was the blog.
Well, that's a good segue into our first question. How did you get into, well, that's kind of like more about how you got into the social media aspect of cross stitch and the needle arts, but how did you, let's go way back, or maybe not so way back, but how did you get into the needle art? Yeah.
Crafting. Yeah, we're going way back. My mother dabbled in a few things when I was a child. She had some crewel work. She did a little bit of knitting. She probably did a little bit of cross stitch, but nothing that I ever really would have been able to tell at that time was cross stitch. She was always usually a monogamous project worker, and it was something that she would do very rarely, but at least she knew how to do it. She would sew as well. Occasionally she would sew, if I needed a fancy dress or something like that. So she tried to teach me how to knit when I was very young, and it did not go well. At all. Did not go well. So fast forward a few more years after that, we had gone to a local museum in my hometown, and there was a display of toys and sort of arts and crafts from the olden times, things that would have occupied young children of that time period. And I'm sure there were samplers displayed on the wall. I would probably guarantee that there were samplers displayed on the wall, but I wouldn't have known what I was looking at, so I don't have any memory of that. But we were in the gift shop afterwards, and my mother purchased me a small kit, and it was a cross-stitch kit to make a pin cushion. And so I took that home, and it came with instructions. I was always very much I want to figure it out myself kind of child. I didn't take instruction easily or well. So I followed the instructions, and I picked away at it for the next 2 years. So I think I was 12 when I started it, and I was 14 when I finished it. And I did finish it into a pin cushion. There was a mistake in the chart, and that's probably why it took me 2 years, because at the time, I didn't recognize that it was a mistake. I just couldn't understand why it wasn't working. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't make the pattern fit, and it was wrong. But the way the pattern was charted, it was hard to tell. So eventually I left the mistake as is, and because I just wanted to finish it. I finished it as a pincushion and I gave it to my mom. So that's how it all started. And then I probably picked it up again later in high school, more in university as kind of a stress relief kind of thing to do. And I always worked from kits, dimensions kits, because that's all I could find to purchase. I didn't know any differently. And then, you know, when I was pregnant with Sarah, I discovered that there was a needlework shop in town, and I wanted to make some patterns for her wall. So John and I went to the shop, and that was the first time I met Kathy and Neil at Thread and I, and it was the very first time I purchased linen, and I purchased all of the threads to make these Winnie the Pooh designs for her wall. And that was the beginning of the end. From that visit, so let's see, that would have been 2000, because I'd loved stitching before, but before that I was very much a monogamous.
Mm-hmm.
Not by choice, but because that's all I had. So I would work on what I had. And then around the year 2000, actually, no, I am a liar. It was 96. So it was well before Sarah, because I have a few charts that were done before that. Anyways, I'm sure I've got my timing wrong, but once I walked into Thread and I was a goner. So it's been since then. See, that was a long-winded way to tell you.
Okay, so
I'm a talker, Gerald.
Let's backtrack in the question, in your answer here a minute. So, and maybe, because I'm a bit confused, you found Thread and I because of the Winnie the Pooh, Sarah? Like the designs you wanted to do for the nursery, or you...
Yes, because I had found a booklet at Michael's.
Okay.
It was one of those leisure arts books that had all of the patterns in it. And I had never bought a pattern booklet before that didn't come with all of the stuff that you needed to stitch it. And I didn't know where to find all of the stuff. And it was, I believe it was someone at Michael's who said, oh, well, there's a store that you can go to buy all of the separate things that you need. That's when I went out there with my book in hand.
So when you walked into the store, and then of course you were blown away by everything else that you didn't know existed, was there a certain, and I'm sure you browsed around a little bit, I'm assuming.
I don't remember much other than just being absolutely slightly stunned.
Okay.
I couldn't believe there was a whole store dedicated to such a niche thing that I loved so much. It was like walking into a candy store. It was better. It was, you know, Christmas in a candy store. Loved it.
So, okay. So what I'm trying to get to is after those Winnie the Pooh designs or whatever you were stitching, and you went back, was there a certain thing that made you really fall in love with the new style of stitching that you were able to explore? Was there new designs, new style of stitching?
Well, because you can see the shop models on the wall, I was always very much drawn to geometric designs. And there wasn't a lot of that stuff out, right? And so I liked the kits that I was stitching, but I didn't love them. And then being able to see things like the ink circles, not ink circles, sorry, the landmark tapestries, you know, the pillow designs, the tapestries and designs, the ones that go up my staircase, right?
Well, she talks about in her channel, so if you're not sure what we're talking about, you can go back to her past episodes and find out.
So each one is about 39,000 stitches, and they're square. And that is what really, you know, geometric from then on. Love anything ink circles, Northern Expressions needleworks, You know, anything that's square with a repeated pattern, I love it. So yeah, you know, it was nice to just be able to find patterns and be able to kit it up the way you want it. Change the colors, change the fabric, make it your own.
And speaking of that,
did that answer your question or not at all?
Yeah, totally. So speaking of changing the fabric and changing the colors and making it your own, did you jump right into doing that right away whenever you found that store, or did it take you a long time of getting used to just stitching those styles of?
Yeah, I had to fall. I really tried hard to choose. My first choice was always, this is what's listed on the back of the pattern, so this is what I need to do. And then Kathy from the shop was very, very good, because, you know, it's hard to stock a needlework shop, right? So she would offer substitutions. She would say, well, I don't actually have that one, that fabric or that count in stock, but what do you think about this one? And I would go and I would choose all of the called for colors. So it was the fabrics that I started changing first because of Kathy. And I would pull all the flosses. We'd do a floss toss. And I'd bring all the flosses over to the linen counter. And then she would lay out a selection of fabrics that would work, that I could choose from. And then I would look at the colors, what I liked. So did I like my floss on this fabric or this fabric? And I would choose based on that. She would cut it for me. And then I started experimenting with different sizes. So I started out generally with 28 count, you know, and then I branched out and I was brave and I tried 32 and I loved it. And then I tried 36 and I struggled with 36 for a while because it's that old question of 2 strands or 1.
Yeah.
I like really full coverage, so I tend to go with 2 strands, but it just feels a little thick. So then I went to 40 count. 1 strand works beautifully on 40 count. So, you know, it's been an evolution over 20 some odd years, right? So,
excellent.
Yeah.
In those 20 some that evolution, do you feel that your stitching has evolved a lot, or do you still feel that you've gone back to I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, some people have really evolve a lot and they don't really look at what they used to look at whenever they first started. Obviously, I'm not talking about like the kits that you initially started with, but like once you started going to the LNS, the needlework store, and looking at all those different models and everything. So
are you talking about my taste? Like, has my taste changed?
I think your taste, yes. Has your taste changed a lot?
Well, I can actually, I know the answer to that because I have so much stash from, like, I have so much stash because I have been collecting stash for 20, you know, too many years to count. And I still love it all. I still love it all because I've gone through it and there is maybe 2 charts that I think, you know, and you know what? When I bought them, I knew right away, yeah, I'm not sure I love that, but I bought it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward in time, and it's still those same 2 charts. Everything else that's in my stash, I still love, and I want to stitch it all right now, today. So I think my taste has
expanded.
My taste has expanded. I'm a little more into samplers now than I ever was. I never had a lot of interest to stitch samplers. Now I kind of do. But it hasn't taken away anything that I loved 20 years ago. I still want to stitch all the geometric designs.
Mm-hmm.
I still want to stitch anything with a house or a bird or, you know, beautiful colors that speak to me. Big projects, the bigger the better. I tend to be a large project stitcher, and I know you are as well. So, you know, I try to incorporate a few more smalls now because I'd like to actually finish a few things in my lifetime.
Exactly where I'm at right now.
So, you know, but it's all good.
Okay, so let's talk about sewing. So Caroline has her small business, Evertote. You can find it at www.evertote.com. It's an Etsy based retail establishment, and it's at Evertotes with an S for Instagram.
Correct.
How did you ever get into sewing on a sewing machine? Let's start there, and then we'll get into the business.
Okay. Well, I always knew that I wanted to sew. My sister-in-law was always a sewer. My mother was a sewer. I mean, she didn't sew a lot, but she could sew, right? And so being a crafter, I knew how to knit. I knew how to stitch. I've done lots of other crafts. And I thought I really should add sewing to my repertoire. So it was for my 40th birthday, which, you know, was like yesterday. John bought me a sewing machine for my birthday. So I am now 44. So I have only been sewing for 4 years. And as soon as I got the machine, I was afraid of it because it was a really good machine. Kathy helped him pick out, you know, a really nice machine. She said, this will be the machine she can use for the rest of her life. It's, you know, it's an excellent quality machine. And, you know, I was thrilled. I was really thrilled with this gift. And because my birthday's in the summer, and I was given it for my birthday in the summer, but I was a little afraid of it when my sister-in-law was there because she is a very good sewer. And I don't like to feel like I look foolish in front of people, or like I said, I don't like to take instruction. I like to figure it out myself. So I actually waited until people left. John went back to London. He went back to work. Kathy and Clara had gone back home from their holiday at the cottage. And so it was just Nicholas and I. Sarah may have been there at the time, but you know, the kids are off doing their own thing. They're not really paying attention to you. And I sat down with the manual, and I sat down with some scrap fabric, and I started experimenting. And I just had the best time. I had the best time. And then, you know what? I don't exactly remember the sequence of events. It was either that Kathy was there. You know what? She came later that summer. So I don't think she was there when I got the machine, but I didn't want to learn how to use it in front of her. I wanted to already know how to use it. And so that's right. When she came up later in the summer, I had fabrics ready, and I had pieced together some 9-patch squares. And then I had made it into a quilt top. And then when she was there, she helped show me how to turn that into a lap quilt. So from the time I got my machine at the beginning of the summer to the end of the summer, I had completed a quilt top. I had learned how to sandwich it with the batting and the backing. I learned how to make binding. I learned how to attach the binding and sew it on. And I had a quilt by the time the summer was over, and I was hooked. And then it was the following year that we decided to try and make some project bags and learn how to install zippers into those. And I haven't stopped making project bags ever since. Became a bit of an obsession. So that's how it started. I've made a couple of quilts, quilt tops. I have only the one finished lap quilt. I have a couple of quilt tops, but you see, the project bags kind of took over.
Yeah.
everything. And now when I have time to sew, I'm making project bags. I really should. I have a queen-sized log cabin quilt. Kathy gave me all the pieced fabrics for my birthday the next year, and she had the matching set. So we both made the same quilt top, and I'm hand tying it. It's a technique where you don't quilt it by machine. You use, you do it all by hand, and it's kind of like pieced throughout the quilt. So I need to finish that. I love sewing. Love it. Do it all the time.
Then can you expand a little bit into how the business Evertote came about?
Well, Kathy and I, because we were enjoying making project bags, I can't remember whose bright idea it was to start the business. It was, it was something we came up with together, and that we would try to make laptop bags, because my husband owns an Apple. We are Apple authorized resellers here in London, Ontario, and I knew that because he likes me, that maybe he might let me put a few laptop sleeves into his shop. And we thought about earbud cases, little round holders for earbuds, and iPad sleeves and laptop sleeves and things like that. But the problem is that you're trying to sell to a market that doesn't really understand handmade.
Yeah.
Made by hand, nor do they appreciate it, right? They have no idea how much time it takes. They have no idea the quality of materials, the cost of materials, sourcing all of those materials. They're used to paying a very specific price for either a name brand like Herschel. Herschel is probably, if I had to compare like a laptop sleeve, Herschel makes a beautiful laptop sleeve. But they're also sourced in a place where labor is very inexpensive. So for my time to make that bag and the cost of my materials, it wasn't really something that I could foresee doing long term, because the profit margin isn't there, right? So I was looking at the laptop sleeve and I'm like, I could put my cross stitch project in here. And then it was like a little light bulb went off, right? That's what we should make. That's really what we should be making, because we're crafters and we know crafters. We understand crafters. And then we started the knitting podcast, the Fibre Friends knitting podcast. So, you start to meet crafters all over the world, and that becomes your marketplace. So that's how it started.
Excellent. And then because of Fibre Friends and Evertote, you created your YouTube channel basically as a spin-off from Fibre Friends podcast, because the Fibre
I wanted
Friends
to talk about my stitching.
Yeah.
I really wanted to talk about my cross stitching, but because there's 3 of us, and you don't want the episodes to be 5 hours long. And not only that, you have to remember that the vast majority of your audience, they're knitters.
Yeah.
And they'll turn you off. Like they'll tune out. And I really wanted to talk about it, but I felt like, not that I was imposing, but that people probably weren't all that interested in what I had to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I really wanted to share it because, well, it's you tend to feel a little bit like you're sitting at home alone doing your thing and no one gets it and your family thinks you're nuts. There are no other crafters in my direct neighborhood. There's one lady who I met who I love her. Her name is Audrey, and I met her through Thread and Eye. But if I hadn't gone to Thread and Eye, I never would have known that she lived in my neighborhood. And other than that, all of my crafting friends I've met through my shop. Generally, everyday people, like the parents at the kids' school, and they don't get it. People see you out with your knitting and they look at you funny, like you're kind of crazy. So, and I really wanted to talk to somebody about it all the time. So, and I talk a lot. So it gave me an avenue to talk as much as I wanted about whatever I wanted for as long as I wanted. And I'm loving it. Having a great, great time. It's been a lot of fun.
Since starting Offthegridneedlearts on YouTube, going on, what, a year and a half ago now?
Yep.
Has yours, we're going a little bit back to your stitching style here. Has your stitching style changed as a result of the channel?
Basically, no. But in a big way, yes. And not my style, but the amount. Because the business has kind of grown so fast because of the channel. My time for stitching has decreased exponentially. I am now sewing full time. I am sewing every day full time. I now run the business on my own, and it is, when you're running a small business of one and it's full time and you're the marketing, the customer service, the manufacturing, the purchaser, the financial person in charge, like, it's a big job. It's a lot. And I wouldn't trade it for anything, because I feel like I've been given a gift. I feel like I've been given a gift at this stage of my life, where I've had 25 years of a great career. Like, I've been a private music teacher for 25 years in my home. I've been able to work from home. I've been able to take care of my kids during the day. Then, you know, now they're in school, I could work at night. And now I feel like I've been given an entirely new career. And so there's a trade-off. The trade-off is that I don't have as much time to stitch. And so the things that I share on my channel, I wish that I could do more of, right? Like, I wish I had more stitching every week to show, but I don't know that I would ever feel like enough was enough.
I was going to say, we all wish we had more stitching.
I know.
Yeah.
I look at everything in my stash, and like I said before, I still love it all. I want to work on everything, every day, all the time. And then you throw knitting into the mix, and you think, I want to finish those socks, or I want to finish that shawl. And then there's a loom over in the corner. Don't even get me started. Like, my family says, John actually said the other day, he's like, you're going to have to sell that loom, because you don't have time for another hobby. And I said, no, I don't want to sell the loom. But it's been there for 3 years, and I still haven't learned how to use it.
Yeah.
But I want to make all the things.
Mm-hmm.
I can't make all the things if you make me sell the loom. So that's tough. There's not enough time. I don't understand people who are bored. People who get bored, who don't have anything to do. It's so far out of my realm of understanding that, you know, I make my own happy, right?
Going into your YouTube channel, Offthegridneedlearts, what has been the most rewarding thing for you having that channel?
Meeting people. Meeting people all over the world. Bar none. That has been, it's incredible. The fact that I have met so many people all over the world, and they're just like me.
Mm-hmm.
You are just like me. I mean, yes, we have differences. You're quite organized. I'm not. Let's call a spade, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you get down to brass tacks, there's something about the personality of a stitcher that we all share similarities, and realizing that you're not alone, that you're not this crazy person who wants to think about and talk about and pet their stash all day long, you go to work and all you can think about is when you get to come home and pull out your stitching. It's a gift. So that's been the best part.
And as a result of the success of your Off the Grid Needle Arts and FlossTube channel, you had this idea of reviving I guess, a blog.
That's right.
Creation for which is now the Facebook group for Friday Off the Grid. Let's go into a little bit of detail about that.
So yeah, that actually originally, when I said I had started a blog, the Off the Grid Needlearts wasn't my first blog. Maybe, I think it was 2011 or 12. My first blog that I started, I called myself the Stitching Strumpet. It was kind of a takeoff on the Yarn Harlot because she's a very well-known and popular knitting blogger. So I was the Stitching Strumpet, and I wrote, you know, sporadically for, I don't know, a year and a half or so. And through blog channels, there was a blog that I found called Let's Stitch. And it wasn't one person's blog. It was kind of a collection of people who, and I don't even remember who started the blog, but it was just called Let's Stitch. And if you belonged to this blog, you could post on that blog. And the premise behind it was exactly the same premise that I sort of reintroduced for the Friday Off the Grid. It was worldwide bloggers. You were encouraged to stitch for 6 hours on the Friday night from 6 p.m. until midnight. And you would then blog about it. So you would take pictures at the beginning of the time. You would take a picture at the end of it. And then you would write a little excerpt about what you had done and, you know, anything else that had gone on during your night that you enjoyed and you wanted to share with other stitchers. And then you would post that entry to the blog. So every Friday night, you'd have reams of people all over the world who were all stitching together. It's kind of like that International Hermit and Stitch weekend. That's another blog thing, IHW something. I never participated in that, but this blog, I always it was sort of a thing, right? And I would tell John, oh, I have to be sitting in my chair by 6 p.m. and I have to stitch for 6 hours, so don't bug me. And it was fun. And then, you know, that kind of fell by the wayside. And then when I started up the blog and I started the Stitch With Me videos. It was because I think I did 1 or 2 Stitch With Me videos, and I talked about that blog during a Stitch With Me video, and I said we should do something like that. And so then we started the Facebook group, and it turned into a whole thing. You started recording the Saturday after party. Yep. And Michelle did the Sunday brunch. Letitia was the party crasher. And, you know, it was, everybody started posting Stitch With Me videos, and all FlossTubers started posting links to their channels and their videos on the Facebook group. And it has become a pretty great community of stitchers. It's way more now than Friday nights. It's, you know, and we call it partying, right? So we party from 6 p.m. till midnight and we share our progress, but it's become way more than that. People party all week long and they post pictures all week long. Very encouraging group.
Excellent.
Did I answer your question?
Of course you did.
I think I did.
What, in one word?
You're limiting me now.
I am. I'm limiting. One word or one hyphenated word. What is stitching to you?
One word.
One word.
Joy.
Why? Now you can talk. Why?
Oh, why? It makes
Why is it joy?
Why is it joy? It makes me happy. It fills me with joy when I get to do it. Everything about it. Choosing the project, looking at the colors, feeling the threads, hearing the threads go through the fabric, dreaming about the next project. All of it. There's nothing bad about it. Nothing. So when nothing is bad about something, it tends to be rather joyful. And I want to do it all the time.
You've been frogging?
You know what? As long as it takes a little break and then I can come back to it, you know, it's a mindset, right? You just get to stitch more.
Yeah.
We love stitching. So, and I have probably only had 2 or 3 major catastrophes, and that's not bad. And really they weren't, you know, it wasn't so bad that I couldn't salvage the project. Well, that's a fib. There was the one, his eye is on the sparrow, and I started it and did the entire bottom left corner in the wrong orientation. So I never would have, the fabric wasn't wide enough. And so that was a complete write-off. I was upset about that. That was not joyful. So thank you for letting me have more than one word.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a lot of fun, a lot of joy. And don't forget, you can go check Caroline out on her YouTube channel, Offthegridneedlearts. You can find all of us on Facebook at Friday Off the Grid.
Yep.
And you can find her on Instagram at Offthegridneedlearts for her personal stitching journey and for her business as Ever Totes.
Yep.
And everything is linked below. And she's also a member of the Fibre Friends podcast, which is where she showcases all of her knitting and knitting purchases and all that fun stuff. So if you're interested in knitting or are learning about knitting with me, because she's teaching a lesson on knitting for all of us knitters, which we're really wrapping up a lot of the basic knitting.
Yeah, we're pretty much done. Now, one caveat about the Fibre Friends podcast that I do always like to mention, in that it's for grown-ups. It really is. It's kind of PG. You don't want to watch it with little kids because I never know what's going to come out of the other girls' mouths. It's not me. I am a lady, but it's, you know, the other two, they can get a little crazy sometimes. So don't watch it with little kids.
Okay, so you can find Caroline on all of those social media networks, and make sure you go give her some love. Follow her if you haven't already, but I'm sure most of you already do. So we want to thank you, Caroline, for coming on and spending some time with us.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
And don't forget, this is our last episode for the season. We will be back after the new year, not exactly sure the date, but taking the time off for the holidays, for Thanksgiving and Christmas, to spend time with family and friends. So we will be back after the new year for our next season, season 2 of Confessions of FlossTuber. FlossTuber. Don't forget to always
be creative. There, I got the last word.